Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This Week in Thought. This is episode 8, and today is March 7th, 2023. And as always, I'm Chunky. In the middle, that's Kassig. Over on the right, that's Redmed. And we've got pretty interesting topic picked out for today. If you've been listening to the last few episodes, you know that we're kind of starting to move in the direction of going back into axiology. So we kind of took a turn through metaphysics and epistemology, and when we came out on the other side, we're returning to value ethics specifically. And so a few episodes ago, we kind of started the discussion by talking about the differences between values and virtues. That was kind of like a central issue for us. And what we decided as we were clarifying terminology is that a value would refer to one specific thing that a person found significant, whereas a virtue in most cases was a collection of values that, when they were taken together, were seen as so profound that those virtues were held by a lot of different people. And so we started the discussion. It's a very interesting discussion. This was maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, so if you haven't seen that, you might want to kind of watch that. Come back and watch that first and then come back to this one, because what we're really doing here is something that At.Redmed suggested at the end of last episode. He said, well, if we could start with listing some virtues, each of us list out virtues that are kind of important to us, we could look for some overlap, and then we could kind of focus on just the similarities, the virtues that we have in common, talk about those a little bit, and then that would be a good lead-in to talking about our own personal priorities. So really, I think kind of the direction we want to go ultimately is we want to compare, well, what are these virtues that we think are so important that they should apply to everyone, versus what are our own personal individual priorities, and how do they gel with or maybe conflict with the virtues from time to time. So for the first half of the episode, I think we're going to talk virtues, and then we're going to get into priorities probably in the second half. I'm not sure how you guys want to start this. We each made our lists, which were very interesting, very telling, and then we had something of an overlap list. I guess I'll real quick mention the overlap list. So there were 5 areas that we had 2 of us in agreement, but ironically there was only one after that we found that all 3 of us agreed with. So the one that all 3 of us agreed with were what we call laziness or industriousness. So this is really laziness applied to efficient problem solving, basically using mental energy instead of physical energy to solve problems. I think that's kind of the sense of the word industriousness or applied laziness that we were talking about. But I will mention the other 5, which I think get honorable mention because at least 2 of us agreed on each of them. So first one is openness and friendliness or companionship. So basically valuing interpersonal relationships. Second one was honesty. 2 of us thought honesty was important. Third one was self-control or self-discipline. Basically behaving in a controlled manner without needing external sort of threat or coercion, the way like a parent would control a child. The fourth one, that was the laziness / industriousness. So we talked about that was one that was held by all 3 of us. And the 5th one was actually humor. So 2 of us said we thought that humor was kind of an important thing. I'm not really sure where to go with that, Redmed. I think you seem to have a plan last time when you asked for this list. So do you want to?
It was more of just kind of let's just see where each one of us stands on virtues and see how those virtues lead into our personal decisions in our personal life, and just to kind of see, and also just to kind of see how the 3 of us actually think and where we come from and where we want to go. There was a couple of we each had ones on our list that didn't overlap each other. So I'm actually more interested in those than what overlap, because if we overlap, we all know what each other are. But the ones that we didn't overlap, where did we come from as far as to get those onto our list?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very interesting. I don't know who'd like to kind of start talking about the things that were maybe unique to them, the virtues that they suggested, but no one else agreed with.
I think I have one of mine's liberality. So just being open-minded, and I'm not sure what all it entails, but I think it's along the lines of the open-mindedness and generosity, being able to exist with people who have different ideas.
Okay.
And I think that's... sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just think it's valuable because it helps people get along, and to me that's the main part of society. If people get along, it'll generally work. And that comes into the other part of the equitas, I guess. I don't know how to say that.
I think it's equitas.
Equitas. Equality, fair dealing, impartiality. If you get rid of corruption, things generally flow well, or better at least. But yeah, I think it's definitely. I think it comes down to personal choice, because it's not like anybody's really saying that one of these virtues is really a vice and will lead to the downfall of humanity. It's if everybody followed any one of our lists, I think things would turn out pretty well. So to me, it's more. I think this was pointed out in the pre-show that it does seem to be like a personal way of approaching the world, and probably what we need, what we want to see fixed is how we choose the virtues. But I'm sure that's projection and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't see that as a bad thing. It's just what it is.
See, like one of the ones that I had, I think, let's see, dignity.
Dignity.
I've got this off of Kassig's list because I went to look up the he said he was more or less the Roman virtues, so I went and looked those up, and I was like, that one's pretty good. I'd have to look. I didn't write down what it was exactly. I'd have to look it up again. But I kind of like that one. Forgot where I was going.
Well, I would kind of like a clarification. When you say dignity, or you said you were quoting a Roman virtue, what exactly did they mean? Did they just mean self-respect? Like, what does dignity mean?
I think it was self-respect.
Okay.
It's the list I was using. It says dignity, a sense of self-worth, and personal pride.
There we go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So not over someone else, but
right.
Pride
Dignity
of yourself as an individual.
Yeah, that's what I think of as dignity is pride in yourself, saying, not boasting about what you've done, but realizing I've done these great things to myself, or for myself. I've done these things to help other people. I'm proud of that, but I'm not going to go and tell everybody in the world, hey, this is what I've done. I guess it's more humble than dignity.
Well, that's interesting. I was just going to say, do you think that a person can have two different virtues that oppose one another at the same time? Like, for example, pride and humility. Can you be both a proud person, proud of what you're doing, and yet also a humble person in that you're not boasting about the things that you find valuable in yourself?
Oh, yeah, I believe so. I believe that, I can be humble enough to take care of myself, keep myself clean, keep myself healthy, keep myself on a, regular bathroom schedule. But I'm not going to be proud enough to say, hey, I have just done this. I'm not going to go around, I'm not going to tell you that I had a good BM today, so I want you to be proud of me.
Well,
that's humble, but it's also dignity to me.
Imagine, though, that, like, for example, what if you were literally the best in the world at some skill? I don't know, like carpenter, for example. I'm just pulling off the top of my head. Let's say you're a really good carpenter, and it turns out, like, you study other carpenters, you join carpentry guilds, you see how other people do it, and it turns out after a while, like after a decade, you discover you're actually the best in the world. You're the best carpenter. Now, does humility still play a role? Should it still be a virtue that you aspire to? Or is that somehow disingenuous? To treat yourself as just equal to the common carpenter when you recognize that you yourself are, in fact, the best in the world.
Personally, I wouldn't be like, hey man, I'm the best, so you need to learn from me. I'd be more along the lines of, okay, I'm pretty good. Can I help you out? Can I give you a hint? I wouldn't demand people to learn from me. I wouldn't say, I'm the best in the world. You need me to do that job for you. But that's just me.
Here's a question, maybe for both you guys, but do you think that there's ever a case where arrogance is justified
No.
as an acceptable behavior?
No, because I think the arrogance part is where you hold whatever superiority you have over other people. It's the idea of, I'm a unique and individual snowflake, just like everybody else. And I think you can say, yeah, I'm the best carpenter in the world, and go and happily communicate with the best dishwasher in the world, or whatever hierarchy of work you hold, like some jobs being good, some jobs being bad. As long as you can say, I do this well, I do this bad, we're all in this together. Let's pool our resources and what everybody's good at and accomplish stuff.
It's interesting that we all have sort of a disdain for arrogance. I mean, you might even say that we would call that a vice, which is like a negative virtue. It's like on the negative side of the aesthetic spectrum, but it's a large abstract collection of values that are undesirable, as opposed to a virtue, which is a collection of values that are desirable.
Well, and each virtue, its opposite is a vice.
Can you give an example? Could you give an example?
They have it for the 7 virtues, like greed, like charity would be the opposite of greed. And you can go down the list of most of the virtues and figure out what the opposite to it is. But it's usually a virtue and a vice are viewed as similar. So like chastity versus lust, I think, is another one. And like you can list them, like for each of the 7 planets has a virtue and a vice. But I think you can get knowledge from that. Like you can go, okay, I like these virtues, but you can also say, like, what vices just get you, like arrogance for all of us. And then you can go, okay, what's the corresponding virtue, and then examine both.
Humility is the one that's the corresponding virtue that is the negation of vice, or is the negation of arrogance.
And that might be a regional thing too, because that's generally considered a Midwestern virtue, I guess.
That's interesting, because I knew some people born and raised in the Midwest who were arrogant assholes. So how did they miss out on that virtue that we all seem to have gotten? Humility.
One could say we live in unvirtuous times. I think everyone has said that.
Maybe. Excuse me. I'm saying I knew people from literally decades ago who were just as arrogant, completely arrogant assholes.
I think that even if you make the world perfect, there's still going to be arrogant assholes. I don't think humans have changed in 30,000 years, so I think managing them is probably the best we can do.
Let me ask this. Do you guys think that, since arrogance seems to be a vice that we've all sort of like homed in on, do you think arrogance is a personality defect, like let's say a psychological illness?
I wouldn't call it an illness, but it is a defect would be even a little harsh. I think arrogance is more of a negative personal trait. I mean, it's because I personally believe if you are an arrogant asshole, and the only choice is to surround yourself with a bunch of humble people, and those people aren't going to stand for your arrogance, it's, like, hey, if you're an arrogant asshole, we're not going to give you the eggs to eat for breakfast. You're going to have to go find something for yourself since you're so arrogant. You will conform. You will become more humble. So I think it's a negative personal trait, not a defect. Because a defect is something you can't correct, I think.
Interesting.
Like if I buy a DVD with a defect in it, I can't fix that DVD. I can't fix the defect in it. Like if it's missing 27 minutes of the video, I can't fix that. It's just there. But the personal trait you can fix.
So you think arrogance, for example, is something someone's born with, and it's not something that they learn?
Both. It's both. You're more born with it, and it's just reinforced as you become older and whatever social status you're in, or however you're taught as you grow up.
God, see, that's very interesting. I actually disagree there. I think that about 99% of human behavior is learned, which is to say programmed by experiences. People around you, parents, family members, teachers when you go to school, your friends when you gather social groups as you get older, and then eventually your peers when you get into a work environment. I think they're the ones that shape your behavior almost exclusively. And I would go so far as to say I don't think arrogance is like an innate defect. I think that's something that's learned, and I think it's something that can be trained out of people. I think people can be taught to be humble. And I think the mechanism is probably a lot of humiliation. I think the most arrogant person could be humiliated into adopting humility.
I totally agree. I agree with the learned behavior, but I still think it's born in you. You know, it's born in, arrogance is born in you just like humility is. You're leaning more towards this, and then your family kicks in and starts teaching you, and your friends start teaching you to be an arrogant asshole, or to be a nun or a priest or a Buddhist monk or whatever. I don't think you can just be taught those behaviors from the beginning. I think it's already ingrained in you, or genetically implanted, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I don't think we know, because you'd have to have almost complete control to do experiments to see how much we're hardwired and how much we can adjust. And, when you add epigenetics to the mix, it's not just nature and nurture anymore. You can be past genetic predispositions to anxiety, a bunch of different things, like through the generations. You can be predisposed to anxiety regardless of your upbringing. If depending on how I believe your mother has been treated, or even her mother. So like there's a chain of trauma. Even if we could, physically fix all the poverty today, there's still going to be problems for generations to fix that epigenetic trauma. I mean, that's why I always like watching the current science, because they keep making it more complicated, really. Which is good, and it's a noble study, but I think it's a difficult thing to solve, I think, because it's so complex and interrelated. But I'd be willing to see evidence to the contrary. I'm certainly not set. Have any set opinions on it, because I certainly hope that it is all teachable. Because then it's just a matter of setting up the right set of rules, or setting up the right set of boundaries or whatnot. It can be fixed. If it's just hardwired into human behavior, then, like I said, it's more complicated. It becomes a more complicated solve.
I think, and see, the reason I say this, that it's born into you, and then it is just reinforced, is because you still run into people that have been brought up very well by their parents and by their peers throughout their life, but they're still a jerk. They might not be as arrogant as they could have been because they were brought up in that way, but they're still a jerk, and they're tolerable, but they're still born into that disposition.
I'm remembering that there's a reason I came to develop a different analysis of that than what you guys are articulating, and I'm remembering now that it was something I had read a long time ago. William Godwin, are you familiar with that philosopher? He was English journalist, so 1756 to 1836, political philosopher and novelist, one of the first exponents of utilitarianism, and the first modern proponent of anarchism. One of the things he wrote was, he wrote this book called, maybe it might have been The Political Justice, Enquiry Concerning Political Justice. So this would have been 1793, like during the time of the French Revolution. And he had this quote, and he said, "Our virtues and our vices may be traced to the incidents which make the history of our lives, and if these incidents could be divested of every improper tendency, vice would be extirpated from the world. So he thought it was all conditioning that if you behave well or you behave poorly, that's because you had good examples or bad examples. And if you wanted to get rid of vice, what you really have to do is get rid of all the bad examples.
I think that's a big if. That's a difficult task.
I've got a counter to that. Now I understand this is just these are animals, but this animal, let's just take, and I've seen it, a pit bull. This pit bull is brought up beautifully, follows commands, is very nice, sits, gets the treat, rolls over, gets the treat, does all kinds of different things, goes up to strangers and is happy as a clam. But then all of a sudden, one little thing happens and it snaps and will tear you to pieces. You're born with it. It was born with that innate instinct to attack. Now, are all pit bulls like this? No. Do all of them just snap at one time? I don't think so. Because I've seen others that were literally happy as a clam, went to get pets, jumped up on the fence and let people pet them all day long. Didn't hardly bark at anybody. But it was still in there that just something will change, and then all of a sudden that learned behavior goes by the wayside. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think to get to that point where vice would disappear, I think you'd have to get rid of trauma as well.
I agree.
Or have a way to heal it.
I agree.
I don't know, chemicals and therapy or whatnot. And I'd love to be able to have a time when we could observe. Okay, we've gotten rid of trauma. Let's see how much is hardwired and how much is flexible. That would be a wonderful
well,
a wonderful thing to be able to debate.
I don't know if this is tipping our hat a little bit, but Kassig and I, in one of those prior discussions, I remember we started to talk a little bit about micro-societies. I think might have been the term we used, or maybe we used the term commune. Do you remember that?
I don't remember specifically.
Yeah, so
it was commune. You guys mentioned commune.
Sorry, everybody. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. We got to work around here, so we're going to use this for the rest of the episode. Anyway, what I was getting at is there was an earlier discussion. Kassig and I were talking about communes, and I don't think we ever made it clear to the audience why that's such a valuable thing to us, why it's so interesting. And it really has to do with the fact that the commune does the best of both worlds. From the external perspective, it can work just like a corporation, a non-profit corporation, in that it pays taxes, it owns land, and the people that live on it can be seen as employees, essentially. But it has the other added benefit that it's essentially an isolated subcommunity in which things like good behavior can be made by design, written into the charter, let's say, of the organization, so that the people that join all mutually agree to hold themselves and one another to very high standards of conduct. So in other words, you can in this environment you can create a micro society that, even though it has to deal with all the harsh let's say realities of the outside world, once everybody comes together as a community inside the commune, they can live out their ideals in a virtuous way. They can basically embody the virtues. And again, we're talking about communes because I think we sort of had this drive to push for how could you use this model in a secular context. But it's not a new thing. This is exactly what things like cloistered, convents and monasteries have been literally for like 1,000 years. Communities of people who they exist within the larger world filled with corruption, but they've actually created an isolated community of sort of ascendancy, like moral ascendancy, where they can behave with the idealized ethics that they're pursuing. Now, I don't know if that's interesting, or maybe Kassig, maybe you have a different take on that.
No. I think I'd like to see a secularized version where small families could do a similar thing, kind of separate themselves, not in an arrogant way, but in a, we want to go do this, it works best this way, do what we do, it works great. Yeah, no, I think small-scale communism is awesome. As long as keep it from becoming a cult.
Right.
I have something to say about that, though. the convents and monks and those types of people all have one thing in common. They're there for that common reason. Whereas if you have a micro community of males and females, you're going to grow that community. Inevitably, children will be born. You can be nice to that child as much as you want, but if it's ingrained to be an asshole, it's going to grow up. Might not be as big of an asshole, but it's still going to be an asshole. I think. I think it's just in our DNA to act the way we act.
Let me just ask real quick, because this is fascinating to me that this is interesting to you, which is, do you think there's something like, let's say, I won't call it the asshole gene, but let's say the arrogance gene. Do you think there's actually a genetic trait of arrogance that gets passed from ancestor to descendant?
I would honestly have to go out on a limb and say, yeah. Because, I mean, think about it. How many military families are there? Generation after generation after generation of this family goes into the military. There's something up there that's saying, I'm going to go do it. And it's not just they stay a private until they get discharged. They advance up. You've got to have arrogance to advance up the chain. I mean, it's not a huge amount of arrogance, but you've got to be able to say, okay, I'm good enough at this. I'm going to show my commander that I'm good enough at this to be the next rank up. So you've got to have the arrogance. They don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Kassig, I've never been in the military, but you've got to have some form of arrogance to go up in rank, do you not?
Maybe not necessarily arrogance, but you definitely have to have confidence in your own abilities. There's a lot of politics. It's like any other organization.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, I will have to say that, again, I have never been in the military, so I don't know. But I personally think that there is some form of arrogance that is probably genetically in there and passed down throughout the generation. Generations of people.
I will say, God, as we're talking about this, and it's interesting that all three of us sort of homed in on this as something that we consider a vice. It makes me think that in our lives, all three of us at different times have experienced a lot of people that are arrogant, and that it has rubbed us all the wrong way, like it's grated against us. But I wonder, do you suppose that what we tend to think of as arrogance, or let's say the asshole trait, or whatever it is that certain people have, they carry themselves that way and it rubs a lot of us the wrong way, do you think it may be actually just a heightened form of what Kassig was describing, where it's not arrogance, it's hyper self-confidence. It's a greatly inflated sense of self-worth, meaning they're not trying to look down on people, they just truly believe that they are elevated, that they exist at a higher level of success, a higher level of achievement than their peers. And so they think they're being honest and genuine when they interact with people in what are perceived as condescending ways.
And you can have, I think people have different personality types and they're predisposed to them. I think I think a lot of conflicts can arise from that, where, like, as an introvert, I think most extroverts are just batshit crazy just on their own. So a lot of it might be, I think you can have objective standards, but I think a lot of that stuff is projection and all of that.
As far as what you were saying as they feel overconfidence in themselves, I can see that, but not in. I don't think I'm seeing it the way you're describing it. I see it as, sure, they're confident in themselves and they believe that, I don't want to say superior because I don't think that's the word you use, but they're a level above everybody else, and they don't intend to look down on people, but they do. I see it in people with money and people without money, people who are black and people who are white, people who live on the street and people who have a house. Everybody in any position in life can be an arrogant asshole. It doesn't matter where you live or how you live. It's just something that's genetically disposed to you.
The genetic disposition part is the part can't get on board with. And I wonder, just in our sort of modern circumstances, like our, let's say, digitally connected world, or with an internet that's ubiquitous and available on phones that everybody carries around in their pocket. I mean, children are born now and they just basically have a phone as like their first device. They interact with everything through it, and that's just like second nature to them. I can't help but think of the internet, or at least the way the internet has evolved, as becoming something like this global digital monument to narcissism. Like, there's so much content out there which is just people publicizing themselves. I took a shit, and then they send that out, and that's like a post, like a tweet or a whatever. Everybody's like, oh, this is a celebrity. Oh, let me give it 50,000 likes for their shit that they just took. I mean, to me that seems to be like an echo chamber for breeding that self-interested, self-important behavior. I kind of wanted to get your guys' take on that and see if you think that's true.
I'd love to see somebody start a Reddit or Twitter or something. I think that virtual shunning can be used for a lot of good. Like, let's say somebody walks around with, like, I don't know, $5,000 shoes. Instead of going, ooh, wow, they're really important and awesome, there should be millions of people going, you're disgusting. That could have fed 100 people for a month. And I'm not, the occasional luxury item is, I understand, people need to keep themselves going. But when most of the world lives in horrible poverty, showing stuff off like that is probably not the best way of going about things. And we need to hold them to. And I think now is one of the first times in history where we can. That the internet, is somewhere where everybody can film people's bad behavior, display it, and go, stop doing that, do this. And it'll get ruled by consensus, hopefully for the good.
See, I've met people who have never been on the internet, and they're still an asshole. I've met people who have phones, but don't have the internet on their phone, and they're the most pleasant people I've ever come across. And both of them could be homeless. Both of them could live in a mansion. It doesn't matter.
Is it generational? Like, when you think back in your life, the people you've encountered that you thought, yeah, this person's an asshole, or at least you thought they're very arrogant, they have very off-putting characteristics. Are those things that you think you saw more frequently in generations older than us, or in our age, or younger? Or is it pretty much steady, the percentage of people that are assholes across all generations?
I think it's pretty much steady.
Yeah.
But I will agree with you on one thing. A lot of that behavior was learned and was adopted through their surroundings. I will agree with you on that. But as far as your internet thing goes, generally most of a giant part of the population has access to that and falls into that crap that you're talking about, But I deal with people that don't have that, and they're still, you will take care of me because I am this way. And it's like, no, you're just being an asshole.
Which comes back to the virtues that we admire and hopefully try to live out, with the self-care.
Exactly. If everybody had a little bit of self-care in their own life, we probably wouldn't have as many assholes as we do.
Before we move on, because just timing-wise, we got to switch into our second topic here just to kind of get this in. There was something I was going to ask Redmed for clarification, because he sort of clarified it a little bit off camera, but it wasn't. I don't think just looking at his list it was that apparent to me. When you say self-care, are you talking primarily about? I think you said hygiene is one aspect of that, but is there other aspects? Are there other aspects to what you call self-care as a virtue?
Yes, definitely hygiene, as you said. Being able to fend for yourself. I can get up, go get myself a drink. I don't have to call my kid and say, hey, go get me a sody. Or I can get up and use the bathroom by myself. I don't have to use a bedpan. Just being able to be self-reliant. Self-care also falls into, I can make the choice of eating the salad or the fried chicken for dinner tonight. So self-care and personal health, as far as what you eat and what you put into your body. I think I ran out of examples, but
one thing, and again, I don't want to get too far off track here, but when you talk about health, we sort of steered clear of that topic, and this probably isn't necessarily the episode, but it might warrant a future episode where we just talk about why do we consider health to be a value or a virtue or something to pursue. I mean, a lot of people, I would say in the Western world, people hold that as a virtue, although in reality, we seem to fall short a lot. We seem to say, well, I want to be healthy, but I'm going to eat the extra donuts, and I'm going to drink the soda or the beer, and I'm going to sit around on my couch and watch the TV. But then we feel guilty, and we go, oh, but I really aspired to being healthy. Well, I heard this quote, and I just kind of want you guys to maybe think about it, or if you've thought about it, respond to it. It was Ricky Gervais, I think, said this at one point, and he said, being healthy is basically dying as slowly as possible. And that was so I laughed too, but I thought, Jesus, man, you're right. If life itself is somehow innately valuable, and extending life as long as possible is my top priority, well, then and only then should I really worry about health. But if it's positive experiences that I want, like pleasurable experiences that I want, give me like soda and chocolate and pizza for like a day or a week or however long, and then I'm dead. But if you compare that to, okay, I lived to age 100, but I was miserable because I was eating kale and drinking beet juice and having 1.3 M&Ms every week and a half, or whatever stupid regimen some health expert said I need to do to prolong my life. Which of those is the more, not virtuous life, but enjoyable life? Which is the preferable life? And again, I'm speaking in hyperbole. Those are two extremes. I'm not advocating either one. What I'm saying is, I don't think that we should necessarily hold up this concept of perfect health as an ideal, or should we? Maybe we should discuss that a little bit.
See, yeah, my perfect health is not the government form of health. It is not you will eat 2,000 calories a day and you will weigh this much if you are between this height and at this age. That's a bunch of bullshit. Healthy for me is literally what I mean, or what I've said. I can get up and go get the soda that I want, and then sit back down and watch, and not take 5 minutes to get to the refrigerator from my front room, and not take 15 minutes to catch my breath. Health for me is being able to perform your self-reliance and choose what you want to eat and how to get that food. If I want to eat kale and beet juice, and I want to grow it in my backyard, then if I can do that, I'm healthy enough to do that. If I want to go walk down to McDonald's and get a basket of fries, if I can make it, I'm healthy enough to do that. But once it gets to the point that you are not able to do that on your own, you are no longer healthy.
Yeah, I think, to me, moderation is generally what I look towards. If you go in either direction, there are hazards. You got anorexia on the one side. It's like I said, I think the golden mean is one of those things that pretty much stay around forever because it's useful.
Yeah,
just falling to extremes usually leads to disaster in one form or another.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the thing Redmed said about, for him it's utilitarian. Health, or the pursuit of health, it's not a virtue in and of itself, it doesn't sound like. It's just a utilitarian means to an end. And that end that you're getting toward, or that you want to try to achieve or maintain, is just self-reliance as long as possible. So you say, well, I just need to be healthy enough to not have to depend on others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I mean, I'm going to die when I'm going to die. There's no stopping that. You're going to die when you're going to die. There's no stopping that. Even if I eat the kale and the beet juice every single day, at 45, if you're going to die, you're going to die. There's no stopping it. You can't control that.
Right. I got to say, what you said there, boy, that's about the most Gen X-y take on health I've ever heard. I'll bet there's a lot of people our age who be like, yeah, that's about the long and the short of it. I'm not here to be here forever. I'm here to not need other people to not have to depend on other people so they don't have to take care of me. That's about it. I'll stay just healthy enough to take care of myself.
Exactly. I mean, these people nowadays who are like, oh, that you can't drink out of that water bottle because it's got BPA in it. Who cares? If I die at 45 or 78, I don't care. That's when I'm meant to go, I don't care about BPA or peanut butter gives you cancer or, if you lick a window too many times, you get lead poisoning. I don't care.
By the way, for the kids at home, don't lick windows. Paint, it's in paint. Paint chips. Don't screw with paint chips. That's very bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, if any of this is advice, it's bad advice.
Yes.
Well, window licking, yeah. I'm saying stay away from paint chips, windows, any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Window licking, no. Philosophy, yes.
Yeah, window licking, no. Philosophy, yes. Right.
Let me amend.
Especially the old windows.
Philosophy.
Say it again. What about philosophy?
Non-violent philosophy.
Oh, right. Ahimsa, yeah, right. Hey, just because of where we're at timing-wise here, and I know that we're pretty quick going to run up against the deadline. We still have about a half hour. I wanted to shift a little bit because I think we're kind of getting to the point that we're starting to make that transition. Let's make the transition, if you guys don't mind, and let's kind of talk about our personal priorities, our personal motivations. And I mean, we can kind of list them, we can kind of discuss them, but ultimately what I want to see is how our concept of virtue stands up to what our actual priorities and our actual behaviors are. Because even us, I suppose we call ourselves amateur philosophers, but I wonder if we're guilty of holding these lofty ideals that in reality we don't ever meet. And maybe that's the human condition. Maybe no one ever meets their ideals. But yeah, me, absolutely. I have these grandiose ideas, and then the reality is I fall to a much more lower level of base instinct usually when I'm going about my day-to-day life. I don't know if you guys have a take on that or if you want me to start.
No, yeah, I'm right there with you. I am, people will say money is a vice. If we didn't live in a monetary society, it wouldn't be a vice. But yeah, I want money so I can have my personal freedom to go on a trip, to buy this object. If it wasn't for money, I would just go on the trip and I would just get that object. But, that's one of my first things is the money for the personal freedom.
I want to figure out a way to bring people peace. Personal peace, world peace. Did people stop murdering each other and animals? I sometimes have difficulty motivating, so it's always a constant, is this going to be worth anything? Because we're not going to be here in 2100. It's usually where mine comes in. So I always have to, constantly struggle to do most things, really.
You mean us personally, like the three of us and all our contemporaries will be dead by the time 2100 gets around? Or do you mean the whole civilizational collapse?
I think extinction.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that they say that an 8-degree rise in temperature would be catastrophic. And they say, by 2100, I think we're going to be there by 2030 or 2040. So I think that it's going to be a civilization-threatening event. So hopefully we can rise to the occasion.
I think we might be able to. I've been having very similar ideas to that, Kassig, personally. Worried about, have we gone so far with the climate change that it's irreversible? And then again, I saw another one of those Kurzgesagt videos, and they said, actually no. Actually, the technology is catching up, and the large-scale social changes are already starting. We're on a path to halt it, and we may even now be able to reverse some of the climate change that's come about in the last 100 years. So I saw that, and I was like, wow, like filled with hope, like had my hope renewed. And so then I thought, okay, so what if we don't die of a catastrophe? What if humanity does continue? What if we make it past 2100? And then I started to think, well, then what is it that I want that humanity to be? Even though we're all probably going to be dead, unless the biotechnology lets us live longer than 100 years. My guess is, probably not. So we'll probably be gone. And so then I think, well, what what would I like to pass on to the next generations? Better ideas for how to live. One thing I think all three of us could probably agree on is that we're not living as well as we could be as a civilization. Not as individual people, but collectively as a civilization, our values are screwed up. We hold a lot of values in high esteem that are terrible and self-destructive, and then some other values that would really be beneficial we ignore. And so I wonder, well, how can we convince people to change those values? I think this is part of it. I think this is the foundational step, is to lay it out, discuss it, break it down, and then build up the better structure for how values should be built for a society. I think we're kind of doing it. One thing I will mention is that Redmed, what you said about money, boy, you hit the nail right on the head, man. You took the words right out of my mouth. It sickens me how much my life is governed by a desire for wealth. I mean, so I've made it a top priority, partly of necessity, because we can't maintain our lifestyle. We can't pay the mortgage. We can't get the food on the table. Can't drive the cars if we don't have the paychecks coming in. And so before you know it, man, it's like, boy, you can dive head first into that pool, and it's an awfully deep pool. You can just keep swimming deeper and deeper and deeper into that pursuit of wealth, to where at some point you go, man, I don't even recognize anything. I'm just 1,000 feet below sea level, and I don't even know how to come up for air anymore. Like I'm addicted to the greed, I think, that capitalism kind of breeds. And I just wanted to say, I don't think you're alone there. I think, I personally have experienced that. I am experiencing it. And I'm not happy with it, because it doesn't really conform to my ideals.
No, it doesn't. And then at the same time that we're fighting and swallowing the ocean water, we're teaching our children that this is the way you're supposed to live your life. And it's not. We're not supposed to teach our children to live in debt. But at the same time, how can we teach our children to not live in debt if we don't have the money to prove to them that it can be done? So the ideal of living in a non-monetary system, it's great, but I don't think we're ever going to get there.
I think that commune construct that we were talking about is a good first step, because it, again, lets you give the best of both worlds. Where on the exterior of the commune, you function like a corporation, so you can operate as a cog in the capitalist machine that it lives within. But then within it, you can sort of pursue those socialist ideals, the concept of from each according to each's ability and to each according to each's need, and not be reliant on exchange of credits, let's say, for work and for goods. I think it's sort of what is maybe a path to pursuing that I see as being valuable, possibly.
So then, would you put that in one of the ways you would live your life, is to deconstruct to gather people and then deconstruct yours and their way of life to go to this commune?
If I could find the group of like-minded people that felt the same way, I would love to. I don't know, and again, Kassig's been kind of working on this problem like as a research problem, trying to find what the ideal size of that society is, and he had said 150, but that may have been him quoting others that talked about it. I don't know that I have 150 like-minded friends or thinkers that would want to do that. I don't know if you need 150. I don't know what the minimum number you need to start a viable commune is.
Yeah, well, I think it would depend on whether you're going for full self-sufficiency or like quasi-self-sufficiency, like having a communal garden and having shared well, all the way to full everything shared. I was actually thinking set it up kind of like how they used to do pirate ships, where it's based on a share system. So like the commune is, say, 100 shares. Everybody who comes in gets a share. You have different shares set aside for like debt shares, shares to pay back debt, and do it like that. Have divisions, and then if you decide to leave, you can sell your share back to the commune and go about your business doing whatever.
Is it?
I'm just sort of working on the nuts and bolts. But
when you say the word shared, is that kind of like having shares of stock in a corporation, in that you get dividends? Let's say when the commune does well, you get your shares worth of portion of the earnings, let's say, for example.
Yeah. Well, and depending on how you would set it up, you would do different things with the money. Like you'd get a stipend, or it would be in a common pool. But it's it's just a way of saying, I have this percentage of the endeavor, and if I need to leave to go do whatever, I can, give my portion back, or cash my portion out. Just because, like, when, it seems like when you have a cult, it's like, oh, throw all your money into the pool, and now it's ours, and if you want to leave, you shouldn't leave. I want to encourage people to leave if they don't share ideological, if you don't like it, if you don't want to work, here's your stuff, please.
For the good of us and you, please leave. And that's something I don't think most cults do. They don't want you to leave.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's still in your following the monetary type system, because we're trying to eliminate that. I've got this share, but I can turn it in and get stuff for it. That's like I've got this dollar and I can turn it in and get stuff for it.
Well, I think it's just a way of existing in the capitalist system, because I think it's a long road to go towards full cashless society. Full Star Trek. I think it's going to be a long process, and I think eventually, and I think you're going to have sliding sort of rules to deal with that, the transition process. Because I think that you're going to have to provide a equal means of living to get masses of people to come over. You're not going to say, okay, it's just noble to live in yurts and eat sticks. And, people with kids aren't going to do that. Or not many of them. But if you, provide a way going, look, we're healthier. This is much better. There's no, our stress is nothing. It's beautiful out here. This is the way to do it. And I think you can, because I think it's healthier and it is better in most regards.
There's something that God, you guys are kind of touching on here, and I just because of our timing, I want to make sure we hit this, because I think it's kind of central, and again, this may require a whole other podcast episode to be able to cover it. But there was something I had on my list, and neither of you guys touched it at all, and I wasn't sure if it was because you disagreed and it was something you consider, let's say, a vice and not a virtue, or if maybe it just didn't come across your radar screen. And that is hedonism. So really, hedonism I would kind of define as just the pursuit of pleasure. The pursuit of activities that bring you pleasure. And God, I remember I had a debate decades ago with a friend, and she was arguing, I realize now, for a hedonist lifestyle, and I was arguing for, I guess, what you would call a stoic lifestyle. Because at the time, I actually believed that the stoic lifestyle was virtuous, and that the hedonistic lifestyle was vice, was wrapped up in vice, or embodied vice. And I think I've switched completely now. Not that I think that the stoic lifestyle is wrapped up in vice, but I consider it unnecessarily limiting and like self-flagellating. Like to me, it's like masochism, the stoic lifestyle. I no longer see the virtue in it, but I see a lot of virtue in pursuing as much hedonism as one can, unless it becomes harmfully excessive. Now, that's loaded, because what does harm mean? Harm to one person is helpful to another person. I don't know what the extents of excessiveness are when you're talking about when hedonism could become harmful. I would imagine if you like chocolate and you eat one candy bar, you're going to enjoy it. If you eat 2 or 3 candy bars, you're really going to enjoy it. If you get beyond 5, 6, 10 candy bars, you may all of a sudden start to not enjoy it. So I think there's something like a golden mean, as Kassig said, somewhere between it's good and I want to do as much of it as I can, but I need to make sure I don't do it to excess. And to me, I say this is a virtue because I actually apply hedonism to all the things in my life that I enjoy, provided that I find what the limits are where excess begins and I don't exceed them. And I wanted to see if you guys thought that that's true. In other words, inside our commune is something like hedonism to be put up on a pedestal as a virtue. In other words, we tell the people that are members of the commune, hey, find out what you enjoy in life and pursue it, provided you don't get to an excessive level. Do as much of the thing you enjoy as you can, provided it doesn't become excessive. What do you guys think of that?
Maybe that self-sufficiency should be the metric you use. Do whatever you want, but if you can't tend your own garden, you're going to go hungry.
Interesting.
And, I think the commune can be there to help out, people are having a hard time. But, I think oftentimes it involves stealing time. I don't want to do it. I'm going to manipulate someone else into doing it because I want to. It takes time away from my hedonism.
And then you become an asshole.
About what, sorry?
And I said, and then you're born into being an asshole.
Yeah, I definitely think that taking other people's time is part of that asshole formula that we don't like.
I think the hedonism thing is, I've always thought of hedonism as a bad thing. But then when I read what you posted to explain it, and the way you just explained it, of the pursuit of things that you enjoy, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely for that. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, for example, I mean, maybe it's worth giving the viewers an example, because I can see where they would agree with what you said, which sounds like a vice, man, if you're just pursuing pleasure. But what I'm saying is that, let's say you enjoy carpentry, woodworking. Well, doing woodworking in all your spare time, I call that a form of hedonism. Now, that may not be what people think of traditionally when they hear the word hedonism. I mean, I imagine most people, when they think, oh, hedonist, they're thinking this is like somebody that lives the lifestyle of like having orgies all the time. That's not exactly what I mean. Not that that's not included in the large umbrella of hedonism, but I'm saying it's a large umbrella. If you like woodworking, doing woodworking in your spare time is hedonism, I think also. It's just the pursuit of that what pleases you.
Yeah.
What about charity? If you enjoy doing charity, hedonism, that's a hedonistic activity.
Yeah. But there are probably limits, because a sadist might say, well, guess what I enjoy? But then, do we need to step in and say, no? Because the limits of your pleasure have to be balanced against the desires of others to avoid pain.
If you can find somebody to consent. Whatever.
But then we become a matchmaker for the sadists and the masochists. And is that a loaded word? Is that an ideal lifestyle to be suggesting that one undertake in a commune? Because all of a sudden that's starting to sound a lot like a cult, which I think is not something we want to pursue.
It could become like that. Yeah, I don't know how one would. I think just having common sense regulations like boundaries. We believe in consent. Consent is this. If you don't, you're free to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a sadist commune that would be happy to have you.
Right.
Where they all do what you guys are going to do, and see ya, have fun over there.
I'm afraid a lot of cults become that, and I guess that's a danger, where if I start holding up hedonism as an ideal, and somebody says, oh, I'll join your commune, they might be bringing those very cult-like attitudes in, which is not good for the commune.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it can be done. It's just, it's a matter of figuring out the right regulations to make things run smooth. And, the willingness for people to work to fix things when things don't run smooth.
One other thing I'd like to mention, and we're just about out of time here, but there was something that you guys both had on your list I didn't have on mine that you considered virtues, and that was humor. You both said you thought humor was a virtue, and I'm just curious why. Why is that a virtue?
Because negative feelings cause problems throughout the entire spectrum of one's being, and I think even if one has no reason to be happy, it's infectious. So if you can pretend to be happy, you'll eventually become happier regardless of your circumstance. Like, I try to do it now as a form of rebellion in a grim world. This world can't bring me down. Bring on the cheeriness.
So when you say humor, is that like making yourself laugh or making others laugh? Like, what do you mean by that? Both. Okay.
Well, pointing out silliness in the society, and then some gallows humor, and, it keeps people going.
See, I see humor as not even so much as, I'm going to tell you a joke and you're going to laugh. It kind of runs along with hedonism, where we're going to do something that we enjoy, and we're going to get a couple laughs out of it. We'll have a good conversation between each other and make fun of each other for, oh, what'd you put that nail in there for, Ben? Type of thing. Or maybe I should use your head to straighten it out. It's just banter between the two of you. It's humorous, but it's not a person just standing there telling jokes to make people laugh. So it's more along the lines of a pleasure thing. So if you're a person that doesn't have a damn bit of sense of humor, I really don't want to be around you.
I wondered if part of that the reason you guys thought it was virtuous was if it was tied up with that humility thing, because so much of humor is taking people down a peg. It's knocking them off their high horse by mocking their their arrogance or their self-importance or whatever. And so somebody who engages in humor, somebody who's not necessarily a comedian but has a comic way, seems to be a person that can disarm others who are arrogant. They can diffuse situations in which there's tension and conflict brewing, and they can also take the power away from an arrogant person. So, and again, I don't know how much of that is me just injecting my values onto it, or if that's what you all actually meant by it.
Oh, yeah, I think it's all of those things. It does a lot of, it lightens the burden of your work. It helps smooth things along. It knocks people down a peg when that's necessary.
Sorry. Okay. I'm just realizing now, time-wise, I think that Redmed's going to be up against a deadline here. He's going to have to go.
Yeah, in a little bit.
Oh, do we have more time? About 10 minutes. Okay.
I got about 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. Well, this is great. I mean, we sort of started to make that transition away from virtues into priorities. I don't know. Did you guys have either last thoughts, or did you want to talk more about why it is that our priorities don't line up with virtues? I mean, to me, that was the thing. It was there's this contrast between what we think are these ideals and then the reality that forces us into certain actions. And I wonder if we should discuss that.
I think it's just human nature. I think it's at least noble to have higher aspirations and try to go towards them than to just say, nope, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't care if it affects anybody or not. It just is. It's just how it is. At least you're, at least striving towards improvement instead of just admitting defeat and laying down, waiting for the inevitable.
The priorities are, I try to keep them in line with the virtues and the values that I hold. Does it always happen? No, because sometimes you need to adjust it to the situation that you're in. So, I guess you could say, I value life. But if I'm put into a situation where it's my life or theirs, I value my life more than theirs. So, I'm going to do what I can to save mine. So, it's kind of a system that is very flux. It's very fluid. It's very easily adaptable. So my values can change throughout life, and I'm sure they have. But for the most part, I think a lot of them have stayed the same.
Yeah, for me, I think when I was younger, I had a lot of ideals, lofty ideals, and then I got into early adulthood, and I've sort of made a transition into hedonism because I could. I had the resources for the first time in my life. I was able to kind of relax and enjoy life a little bit, which was fine. And then things changed for me again when I became a parent. I was in my mid-20s when I became a parent. And my priorities completely shifted again. Everything became centered around, not only caring for the child, but raising the child. It's constant education. It's this constant process of, I need to take every moment and prepare this person who's completely dependent upon me, prepare this person to no longer need me, to get to the point where they can function independently of me. And then, so now it's been about 20 years since all that transpired, and I'm finding that I'm shifting again. It's so now that need for me to be in that parent role has sort of gone by the wayside, and it's what now? What's the priority now? What should I do? How should I spend my time? And these philosophy discussions are great. I love it because it helps me kind of and I don't, hopefully it helps you guys too, helps me kind of bounce ideas off of other contemporaries and say, hey, what I'm thinking of as a priority, what do you think? Is that valuable or not? What when I'm measuring what I consider virtues or vices, give me some feedback and see if that stands to reason, or is that me getting too isolated of a view. I sort of wonder if this isn't something where a lot of people should do this. I'm saying, like most adults, I wonder if they shouldn't find their own groups of friends and do philosophy-type discussions for their own well-being and the sort of the well-being of one another. I don't know.
Yeah,
That would be good.
yeah, I definitely think it's valuable. It's certainly worth waking up in the middle of a subjective night to do. It's well worth the sacrifice.
It's Kassig works nights. I don't know. Did we never mention that? We might have mentioned it. I don't know. So this is kind of like nighttime, sleep time, a little bit. Indeed.
I blame that. That's the reason for all of my linguistic follies.
That's right. That's right. Sleep time. Well, okay. Anybody got any closing thoughts or wanna?
No. It's. I think we're moving right along. Moving right along into good behavior. And it's been said before, but I still think it's awesome that even though people can disagree about, certain specifics, finding a common way forward seems to be the primary goal, and I think that's applaudable.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Cool. I will say right before we sign off here, we've got a little bit of plans for the rest of March. We've got 2 more episodes coming up, and we're going to record them on the 24th. That'll be episode 9, and we're talking about a very interesting topic, which is deception. And then to round out the month, right at the end on the 30th, which is about 3 weeks from this Thursday, we'll do our final episode, episode 10, which is we're going to discuss time. And there was a little bit of a hint dropped about specifically what we're talking about time, and it's the value of time. How much is time worth, and what does it mean when time is sacrificed or consumed? So that's going to be one definitely you want to tune in for, because it's relevant. I think as we discuss it, people are going to say, "That's how I feel," or "That's what pisses me off too," etc., etc. And I think that's pretty much what we've got planned for the rest of March. So again, we've got a few weeks coming up here. We're going to do some video editing. We haven't actually posted episode 7 yet, so we'll get episode 7 and 8 both through post-production, and then we'll get them posted hopefully within the next week or 2 here before we record episode 9 for sure. Other than that, I don't know that I have anything else. I will say happy vernal equinox, happy St. Patrick's Day, happy spring, happy daylight saving time, which is coming up here on Sunday. I'm happy. Makes me happy.
Oh, yeah, seeing the sun is wonderful.
I don't know. I think daylight savings time should go away.
I
like the dark.
I
like short days.
I had to buy one of those sun lamps because this winter, I would, a week would go by without me seeing. I drive home in the day when the sun was coming up, but for the most part, wake up in the dark. It's dark for a long time. Ugh. Yeah.
God, you reminded me, right when I was out of college, my first job, I worked at this company, and in the office that I worked in, it was what they called a cube farm. So it was just cubicles, like rows and rows and lines and lines. So like 10 or 20 cubes this way by like 50 rows this way. And I worked right in the middle of the cube farm. And along the walls, there were windows, but they always had these long vertical blinds that were on. And so whoever sat in the cubes at the edges decided what they do with the blinds, and most of them would just keep them closed all the time, and they were like blackout blinds, so you wouldn't get sunlight in if they were closed. And so during the winter time, what would happen is I would drive to work in the morning. The sun wasn't up yet, so it was all dark. I'd go to work and I'd park in the walk in the dark, sit in the cube farm all day, not see the sun, and then I'd leave work at 5 o'clock, but by that time the sun was already down, so it was dark again. And this would go on for weeks at a time where I would just never see the sun. I was like, well, I hope it's still there. I hope that spring will come around at some point. We have ourselves a daylight saving time, a vernal equinox, and maybe see that ball of light that is the source of all of our life.
You got to stick your head in between the blind and the window and look out and just put your face against the glass.
I would make it a point to go out to lunch with people just so that I could leave the campus for a little while and see the sun.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
that would drive me insane.
I didn't
There would be hostility from me all over the place.
Fortunately, I didn't last at that job for too long. After about 3 years, I was out of there. And then I never worked in a place where I didn't have access to a window after that, so I was pretty fortunate.
Nice.
Anyway, cool. Well, once again, great episode. Thanks everybody who participated. Thanks everybody at home who watched. And happy spring, I think. Happy spring.
Yeah.
Yep.
See you.
Enjoyable spring.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone. Catch you next time. The opinions expressed in the preceding podcast are not necessarily those of the individuals who expressed those opinions. The creators and participants of this podcast hereby absolve themselves of any and all liability for damages that might arise as a result of the viewing, hearing, or acting upon the ideas expressed in this podcast. By watching or listening to this podcast, you hereby agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the creators and participants of this podcast from any and all claims, demands, damages, or liabilities resulting from the experiencing of the contents of this podcast.